You're listening to the A Bit From Within podcast with Felicia Marty. That's one of my first big learns with this thing is don't overthink it. Like do the research that you need to do to figure out that gut instinct, make a choice, and remember that you can probably make a different choice later if you need. Like, yes, it might be a huge headache. That's a risk we all run, but you can only do the best with the information that you have at the time. Hi there, and thank you so much for tuning into another episode of the A Bit From Within podcast. I'm Felicia, and I am, as usual, so excited to be taking this moment to chat with all of you, because when I sit down to record this, it's like that moment that I get to really deeply connect to myself too. And I'm sure that many of you who've been following for a while can tell that I usually have a loose plan going into these episodes, but I also have quite a bit of it that I just kind of feel whatever it is I'm feeling and share from within and try to be as honest as possible. So like usual, I've got a little bit of that going. Today on the episode, I want to talk about going through the design phase of my website and going all the way up until launch. So if any of you are planning on doing that someday, or you just are curious about how it all kind of unfolded, I just am really excited to share that with you. So first I'll say happy belated Valentine's Day to everyone. Today is February 15th as I'm recording this, and yesterday was a really beautiful day. It was the first day in a while that I had nothing on my schedule, but also not a lot of things in my mind that I needed to fill with my quote unquote free time. So what happens a lot is that I will finally have a day that's clear on my schedule, but I'll be like, okay, great. Now I can get laundry done, and I can get this thing done, and I can create this thing, and I can do this social media thing, and I can figure out this thing. There's been a lot of that lately. And so I really, really needed a day that was just spacious and that was filled with no agenda. And so I made no plans. Dave and I, we don't really celebrate Valentine's Day in the way of like, I need flowers or we're going to do this or that. Like we've done different things in the past, although I will say I'm really glad that we didn't do flowers or anything for each other this year, because when I stopped by the supermarket on Friday morning, the price of just like 12 dozen of roses, I swear it was $59. I could not believe it. I should go this afternoon and see if they're marked down, because I can't imagine anyone paying $60 for 12 roses and some like scraggly baby's breath. Like they weren't even like the usual stunning Valentine's Day bouquets. They were very, very subpar to that. So it's so shocking. I mean, I know that like the price of things goes up around the holiday. We all know that, we all joke about it, but that just felt like something totally different. And, it's so funny because I feel like, with each holiday and social media, it's interesting how they each take on their own uniqueness, or like the zeitgeist that kind of goes through all of us in the ways that things are similar. I saw some amazing proposals online this weekend, and that's always so fun to see. I saw this one where this guy had like this pitcher of water, and in these like mason jars, he was going like the ingredients of us. So he was like pouring in like these different ingredients into like the pitcher that was like our love. And it was, one of the ingredients was like adventure, and the other one was inside jokes, and there was a couple was super cute. And then at the very end, and she was, the person he was proposing to, she was standing there filming him doing this. And so at the very end, he said like, well, this is our love or something, and like poured it out in front of him. And as it like spilled over the concrete, it like, got dark the way that like water on concrete does. But like the secret message was revealed, and it said, "Will you marry me?" on it. It looked so cute. I loved that part of this weekend. But I just think it's so interesting like Dave and I, we don't usually buy each other gifts. We ended up yesterday being like, what do you need? And he was like, I really want some like pre-workout. And I was like, okay, well, I found this bath mat on West Elm that I would never buy myself. And so we bought those things for each other. And then yesterday morning, I'm a huge breakfast girl. So I made us some roasted sweet potatoes with bacon and fried eggs on top and spinach, and then kind of like a spicy aioli on top. It was really good. It was very, very well seasoned. And then he decided to make us mushroom stroganoff with steak on top, which turned out amazing. I told him I gave it a 6.5 out of 10 because one, he has very high standards. And so, I had to be honest with him. There was a little bit too much horseradish in it. It was still very good. We ate the whole thing. It was awesome. And it was kind of like a perfect meal. I mean, it's been such a cold weekend here in Colorado. So it really, it was just a really lovely day, and we spent a lot of the day laughing. We worked out. We just kind of chilled at home, and I'm reading a book right now, so I got a lot of time just to read, and it was everything that I needed it to be. And I'm definitely feeling a little bit more rejuvenated and ready for this week. I'm feeling like really sore in my body. I'm trying to figure that out a little bit right now. I was so tired last night. By the time I went to bed, Dave was, like chatty. I was going to say chattery. He was chatty, and he was trying to say like, oh, I love you. I hope you have a good night. And I was just like, It was one of those nights. And I slept really hard and, woke up feeling pretty good today and just ready for a new week ahead. So let's go ahead and dive into the astro check-in. So this week is kind of interesting. We have coming up on Wednesday, there's an interesting conjunction that's about to happen. And so the moon is moving into Taurus. And remember, the moon travels through the entire zodiac, all 12 signs, in one lunar cycle, right? So each time it comes to the new moon, new moons are beginnings. Our new moon just happened last week for this new lunar cycle. And that is when the sun and the moon are together in the same sign. So the moon is now traveling, through the rest of the zodiac. So it went through Aquarius, and then it went into Pisces, and then Aries, and now this week it's going to move into Taurus. And Uranus is there in Taurus right now, and Taurus is square to all of these planets that are sitting in Aquarius. Remember last week I was like, there's all these planets in Aquarius. So there's going to be a square that happens between the planets that are in Taurus and the planets that are in Aquarius. And squares cause friction. There can be a little bit of a clashing. There can be a little bit of a storm that kind of starts to rumble when signs or when planets are in this aspect, so square to each other. And you can think of it as kind of the way that oil and water don't blend, or we could look at the elements. So Aquarius is air and Taurus is earth. And so we know that fire and air get along much better, while earth and water get along much better. And then when we kind of mix the two, there's can be a little bit of a clashing, a resistance. And so that's going to be happening with us, the planet specifically of Saturn, and then with the moon and Uranus. And it's going to cause a little bit of that same friction. And it could manifest in other ways. Like I've listened to some astrologers lately that are kind of saying like, don't be surprised if there's bigger manifestations of this. Like it could be earthquakes. It could be crazy weather. I mean, we've been experiencing crazy weather. It could be things with money. So like the banks or the stock market or something like that. And of course, like I'm not an astrologer that predicts things. So I'm not sitting here telling you what to do or saying that anything will happen. But it should just be an interesting time to what I think is to prepare yourself to weather the storm. So kind of just have your guard up in a healthy way throughout this week to kind of watch for different, waves, to be able to be flexible, to go with the flow, and to kind of see where you have to be able to weather the storm, right? The other thing that is happening later this week is that the sun is now moving from Aquarius, so it's saying goodbye to Aquarius, and we're moving into Pisces. Sun in Pisces. So Pisces is the very last sign of the zodiac. So it starts with Aries and ends with Pisces. Pisces is also commonly associated with the 12th house, which is the final house, a place of kind of moving towards completion, of like high spirituality. Pisces is a water sign. It is a little bit more of a withdrawn. I mean, all water signs can be a little bit withdrawn, but Pisces is probably the most known for being introverted or like very inward. It doesn't all, I mean, not every Pisces you meet are going to be an introverted person for a lot of reasons, right? Like we know we are made up of a lot of other things, other than just what one planet was in when we were born. There's a lot more that goes into it. But Pisces also has an energy that's very empathetic, very understanding, and in much less of like a mothering kind of way, but almost more like an earth mother kind of way, or like a matriarchal goddess or something like that. Like kind of this very spiritual, all-knowing, kind of caring and understanding and compassion and devotion. So Pisces sun, it should be an interesting time for us, a time that we maybe feel a little bit more permission to just kind of be in the winter months, be patient with waiting it out. I feel like for me, this is always the time that I get the most impatient for summer. It starts to get lighter. We have daylight savings coming soon. And it's just like, there's a lot of, for me, just like urgency for that. But it's a good time to, instead of going too far into that, just remember, like, we need to be here for a reason. Like, this is a good time to meditate, to relax, to continue to let ourselves kind of maybe even like accept what is. To look at what has happened, the way that we're starting to grow, the kind of reality around us, and kind of mix that in with, where our dreams are going, where we want to evolve to, and try to find a little bit of sense of that. So that's what you can expect from what's happening in the sky this week. Let's go ahead and take a quick break, and then we'll dive into talking about the website. So last Thursday, I launched the A Bit From Within website. And this feels like just such a huge moment for me for a couple of different reasons. One, me and my website designer, Monica, have been working on this since late November. So it's been several months in the making. But two, I actually bought the domain and got a website going 2 years ago when I first had this idea for A Bit From Within. And at that time, I think I wrote maybe 2 blogs on it. I designed it myself in WordPress with just a free theme. And it didn't look how I wanted. It wasn't how I wanted. I mean, the whole idea of A Bit From Within there was it was just a baby idea. And I hadn't had the chance to really think it through or know what it was going to turn into. So obviously now things are much different. And my website had actually expired. Like the hosting had expired. The domain I had kept up with because I knew I loved the name and knew that I knew what I wanted, but I also didn't totally know. So last February, the hosting had expired. And at that time, I didn't want to invest in something that I wasn't using, because up till that point, it had been like over a year that I hadn't been using it as anything. And so I just decided to kind of wait on that. And I am going to tell you, as a business owner, to maybe somebody who is also a business owner or a brand person. I mean, I feel like in so many ways we all have to be our own brand in this world, unfortunately. But I will say, like, it is okay to wait when you're not sure. It is okay to wait until you know where you want to go before you have to initiate all those different steps that people will say, you have to have this and you have to have this. And I say that with like a little asterisk that's like, do be intentional and know what you need and where you're going, right? Like, if you are a business and you have no way for anyone to find you online to either be able to contact you or learn what you do, that's probably not the best way to go, right? Like, have some kind of social media that you are okay having. You don't have to update it all the time, but have a spot that can link to somewhere that people can find out about you. I definitely think that part is pretty essential. But as far as having like a fully designed website, or if you have a strong website, then do you need all of the social media? That part is up to you. And that's probably something we could save for a different day. Okay, so getting back on track. You guys know I get off track easily. So I had let the hosting expire, and then March came along and the pandemic hit and the yoga studio closed, and suddenly I had to figure out, okay, well, what am I going to do? And I didn't think about the website too much there at the beginning, because I knew I more needed a platform that people could actually get my content, right? Like who wanted to practice with me could come practice with me. And that also took a couple rounds of figuring that out at the beginning too. But I fell into Patreon pretty quickly because I liked how simple it was. I love Patreon because, one, it's a really cool platform that supports all kinds of different creators and people offering different kinds of inspiration or art or service of whatever kind. But I liked that I could kind of, make it different tiers, and that it was very user friendly. People just subscribe for what they want. They get charged once a month. It's very easy. The platform, I love that the content gets emailed out and you could watch it right in your email, or digest it all in your email, or you can go click on the post and actually interact on the website. You could drop comments. It was the perfect platform to get started, and it still is. So I'm still using Patreon. For everybody who's curious, Patreon is the main way for me to share new content on a weekly basis with all of the people who are interested in A Bit From Within. But what I realized kind of early on is that there was a lot of resistance to change, especially in the yoga community. And there's nothing bad about that. I'm not calling it bad. It's just, it really took a toll on the community to switch onto online. And I completely understand, and I feel it too. There is nothing like being able to walk into a space that feels sacred towards you. There's a ritual about going to a yoga class, especially in such a beautiful place that I used to teach, and that so many of the people who are listening to this and the people who have practiced with me and the people from Asana, we all unite in that. We all understand there's this beautiful ritual, this amazing space. When you step into it, it feels magical. And so losing that, especially, none of us knew how long it would be, right? Some of us thought, okay, this is just going to be a couple weeks, and then turned into longer and then longer and longer. And then eventually the business couldn't stay open. And so we all kind of suffered this loss. And I think that between, kind of waiting it out and with where other, when you're in a kind of a space of survival, you kind of redistribute where you're trying to take care of yourself. So if you're out of your habit going to yoga, you're not necessarily going to replace like your yoga practice with doing yoga at home. You're going to find different things that try to meet that same place inside of you, or that fill a new place inside of you. And there can be good in that too. Like maybe any of you have picked up new things that you never would have if it wasn't for the pandemic, right? Or maybe your efforts had to go towards your own well-being, your own businesses, or your own households. And so, like I said, there's no judgment in there from anybody who's listening. But the reason I bring that up is I realized kind of quickly that Patreon wasn't going to be as popular as I guess I kind of hoped it would be. That's if I'm being honest. And I, of course, as a business owner, the first thing that I like to think when something doesn't kind of go how I originally expected it to is why? Like, what are some of the reasons? And of course, some of them are what I just explained to you, which is things that I can't really do anything about, and also that I completely understand. But two, I think that part of it was because Patreon, a lot of people aren't familiar with that. So when I'm like, hey, like I'm on Patreon, people are like, oh no, like not another platform to have to get on. Like, what is that? What is she offering? Like it kind of put up a wall of resistance right off the bat. And so, first, like I said, I wasn't thinking about the website because mostly I was just trying to figure out how to do what I was doing. Like you kind of just have to work through one thing at a time. So like the first thing was like, how do I offer yoga classes? And I kind of went back and forth between like, do I try a Zoom option? Do I try a live option? I went through a couple different platforms before I just settled on how I'm doing it now, which is basically I film the video, I edit it, and then I put it up on Patreon. And that is, it works. It's great. I, am protected by insurance, so that works. And so once I got that working, then I was also trying to figure out, okay, do I want to stick with offering meditations? Like I was never known as a meditation teacher, but I'm really enjoying that part of it. So yes, I wanted to stick with that. And then I was kind of, working on, the podcast and the lunar guides and all of these other things. But then of course, wedding season hit. And so I had to kind of just keep doing what I was doing while also knowing that my other business required a lot more energy and effort and time from me. So got through that, and that, kind of takes us up towards November. And that's when I really realized I'm like, okay, obviously a lot has changed since I was last in a place to really reevaluate this. And I really am ready to start this website. And so what could this website do? Obviously, I don't want it to take the place of Patreon, but I want it to be a place where I could let people know a little bit more, what is A Bit From Within, and what can I offer on the website that can be a companion to what I'm doing on the Patreon page, because I think there's so much awesome content that I've created and shared over the past almost year that I want to be able to have, anybody be able to go to abitfromwithin.com and kind of get a taste for the way that I, kind of hope that people can take better care of themselves, the way that I hope that people can use the lunar cycle to help track their own innate rhythms and improve their own well-being. And then, of course, allow people who maybe don't want new yoga classes every day, but they're looking for one class that they could have on hand, that they could purchase that. Or if they're just into meditation, they can just download one meditation. And so obviously that can cater to a much wider market. And it can also be, what I think a website should be is that introduction to who you are and a way for people to get involved with you. So I needed it to be easy to use, explain who I am, what I'm about, and give people a way to, start to interact with me as a teacher if that's what they want. So that's what I did. And it was the weekend before Thanksgiving that I had actually reached out to a close friend. In fact, it's so funny because part of the reason that I was so stuck for a while on starting this new website is because my other website designer who's designed FeliciaMarty.com, he is a very successful website guy who was in Colorado, but then moved to North Carolina. And so he is a busy guy with a busy business and a big, lovely family. And so it would have been a lot harder to coordinate with him. And so I was in search of somebody new. And that honestly was like my first roadblock because I had no idea who to ask, where to go for that. And then I remembered that one of my, it's kind of like out of sight, out of mind. We realized that like we weren't Facebook friends, which is so silly because she's like a person that I just love dearly. And she's a former client of mine. And so I reached out to her just like, hey, it's been a little while since we've talked. Do you want to possibly talk about building a website? Like I know she has a full-time job doing this. So I wasn't sure if this would be something that she would want to take on or help me with, or if she even could. And then, of course, we met and it all just started to fall into place. Like it was a good thing for her, it was a good thing for me. And it just started out like on a really awesome level. And so, at first you kind of have to kind of set out like, well, what do you want this to be? Like, how many pages do you want it to have? What do you want it to be capable of doing? So, for me, I had to say like, yes, I want there to be like a store component. So then it was like, okay, well, now we have to figure out like which, behind the scenes platform thing. Like, do you want to do Shopify? Do you want to do WooCommerce? Like, do you want to do whatever? So then there was a lot of logistical things at the beginning. And I think that is the hardest part of designing a website is there's a lot of technical aspects and there's a lot of creative aspects, and you do have to be able to hold space for both, even if you're not good at both. And I think as a business owner, there's so many opportunities when you're getting into a new website or you're launching a new thing. There's so many opportunities to second guess yourself. Like, well, which platform am I going to go to for charging clients? What am I going to do for this? And it's like, you can get so in your head. And so that's one of my first big learns with this thing is don't overthink it. Like do the research that you need to do to figure out that gut instinct, make a choice, and remember that you can probably make a different choice later if you need. Like, yes, it might be a huge headache. That's a risk we all run, but you can only do the best with the information that you have at the time. So you can't do everything perfectly knowing like that you will never make the wrong decision here, but you just have to make the best decision you can at the time. So we kind of figured out some of that back end stuff. And luckily, for me, like I'm a photographer and I do a lot of stuff with, I don't want to say with like, I do a lot of stuff with graphic design because it's not really how I do it. Like everything that I do and make is in Photoshop. So that's not like real graphic designers don't do that. But I know how to change an image size, how to use PNG. Like I have a lot of workable skills when it comes to that. And that really helped because we were able to like work in tandem together. So she could figure out, the entire website, but then I could put in the pictures that we needed and change that kind of stuff. Or if we needed a different icon size for this or a logo for that, like we could do that. And that might be one of the more tricky things that I didn't get to experience is, if you don't have that skill set, like, do you end up hiring a website designer that has some graphic design ability, or do they work with somebody who can help you in terms of that? And of course, like they always say like your website needs to have great photos on it. It's one of the most important things when it comes to a website. And so I felt an extreme amount of pressure there because one, I'm the photographer. Like I don't like to be in front of the camera, and yet it is, my website. So I did feel like I kind of needed to have a presence on my website. Honestly, there's probably too many pictures of me on my website now, but that's partially because we created this during this time where there's so much to create. And so that's one of the things that probably when I have some time and space from it, that I'll probably go back through and figure out, okay, where can there be photos of other things that still portray and capture this moment that aren't just like Felicia. It's a little Felicia heavy. But that is another area that worked out really well for me because Dave was able to take those pictures. And I will tell you, neither of us are very good when it comes to planning photo shoots for ourselves. We did just 2 photo shoots for at least current. There are some pictures on there that are just older pictures that he has taken of me in the past. But we just did 2 photo shoots where like we went out in, must have been December, to a park near our house and just played around. And I was kind of casual in the photos and they turned out pretty good, but I needed a little bit more variety. So end of January, he came to another session with me, like right before I was going to shoot, and took like 15 minutes worth of pictures of me, and we were able to use them. So I'm very lucky that I had that option to be able to do a lot of the photography and post-processing myself and not have to go through a third party, because that is definitely something that will slow you down. Is the more, people you have working on these projects, the more hands you have in it, like the more challenging it can be. The other thing that I will share is in terms of a tip, if you are ever going through this, is make sure that whoever takes your photos gives you a lot of variety in terms of how you can use the pictures. So like being over on the right or left side of the photo and having negative space can be really nice to be able to lay text over. Also, like it can be really hard if you don't know your theme. Like a lot of, on my website, if you go to abitfromwithin.com, you'll see on the header of most of the other pages, like about or the blog, there's text in white. And so, sometimes it really just depends on your photo if you're going to use like a light color or a dark color, but laying text on top of an image can be very challenging. And so sometimes, you have to recrop an image so that the words go over a part that is darker underneath or lighter. So you definitely need to be able to have photos that can be moved and kind of manipulated in a certain way that serves the purpose of where they end up landing. Because, when you go to take your photos, you may or may not, and you probably won't have a plan. Like, it's not like it's nice to have a shot list, which is like, I need a photo for my about page, for my blog page, for my contact page. I want a smiling into the camera. I want a laughing. I want a standing away from walking away from the camera. Like I'm just making this up off the top of my head. If you can have a shot list kind of like that, that is amazing from a photographer perspective. But the reason I say you may not have that is because a lot of times by the time that you need photos, you're still dealing with some like not fully fleshed out ideas. Like it's kind of this constant process of like, I have the next bit of idea and then the next bit comes. And so it's kind of like this constant unraveling, and that can be very tricky. But I would say, like, if you are charging a photographer, if you don't have the, luck like I do to just be like, Dave, let's go grab a picture of this. Try to be as thought out as possible. And, it is hard to see the website to come together without photos, but you can use photo placeholders while you figure out what that needs to be. So if you need to delay your photo shoot until towards the end of your design process, as long as you can get the photos back by your turnaround time, it might not be a bad idea to wait until a little bit more of the ideas come together, because there's a better chance that you'll get the right photos that you need for that. So, and remember, like, you can always use photos for social media too. So if that is like a stressor, for you, just remember, like, I don't think you can go and get bad photos taken. It's just a matter of like, did you get the right ones for what you need for your website? And that's honestly kind of leads into like the other like biggest learn that I had from what I went through with my website. Like there was a lot of things that went just so well with designing this website process. Like I would honestly give it like a 10 out of 10 experience in terms of like how it all came together, how I was able to work with the website designer. Like she was amazing. I was able to figure out what I needed to do my job of all of it. Like it was, all of that went great. And we had found a theme to kind of use as inspiration. And then of course we changed it to all of, you know, the A Bit From Within colors that I wanted and the new logo. I had to get a new logo, or wanted to get a new logo. And so there was those things. But as we went forward and it was up to me to figure out a lot of the content, right? Like I needed to create like the text that goes beneath each of the headers, and I needed to write blogs that were ready to go. And I wanted to have a blog for all of the podcast episodes. So each time I write like this, I'm going to write a blog episode, or a blog episode. Ugh. Kind of like that, a blog that goes with this episode that can actually be linked at the bottom. And so there was a lot of back work that I had to do, a lot of content creation. And then, of course, as I'm going through them, I went through probably like 5 different iterations of like what looked good in terms of like product thumbnails on my Explore page. Like different versions where it was like kind of like what I do for Patreon, but then I wanted to change it up. And so then I did different colors, and then those colors didn't look good with the rest of the website. So then I had to go back to the design palette, and, it was just like round after round after round. And what I do think sometimes like you just don't know until you see it. But what I wish that I probably would have done is just, and the reason I'm pausing is because I wonder if I would have known to redesign it if I had waited. Like I really needed to see it. But okay, so what I will say is like, if you're gonna go through, different iterations, like just make one. Like where I made a mistake is like I would make like 3 or 4, or like with my blog, I was so like caught up on this, but I was like, I need 9 blog posts that are like ready to go. It's kind of silly now that I say that, because like I don't think anyone would have had a problem with me just evolving it naturally. But in my head, like this is what I needed. And so I had like created like all 9 blog post headers that, when you click on the blog, you see the different headers. And I had created, like, spent so much time doing this. I ended up going like through 2 different iterations before I got to what you see now. And each time I was creating all of them. So like there was so much back end work of like uploading them and then looking at them and then realizing I didn't like them and then deleting them. And it's like, I wish I would have just done just one picture at a time, let the rest be placeholders. And that would have saved me a lot of time and a lot of frustration. And, this whole, thing that I just shared, it kind of brings me to my final, thought on this, which is just, you have to have a balance between making the content you need and then preparing to launch, because I think that there were certain times that I would have preferred to kind of wait to launch until I felt ready, until I felt I had all my content. And I have these really cool guides that are for sale and under the Lunar Kits. There's like a new moon guide and a full moon guide, and I'm super proud of them and had so much fun creating them. But I did feel like slightly under the gun just to finish them in time. And which is so funny because I had more than enough time. Like they've been ready to go. But while I was creating them, I had this feeling of like, what if I'm not done? Like, what if I I was kind of balancing like this creative, like an author output at the same time as I'm trying to manage it from a business perspective. And any of you who are out there who have run a business, managed a business, owned a business, you kind of know this constant balance between having to make decisions, like just make the business decision, like this is our launch date. We need to get everything ready to go and kind of put your foot down at this. And then also like the other sides of you that are like, oh, but we need this, or I need more time with this. And like, you're always riding that balance. And, I guess my biggest advice with that is just remember that it is a balance. Remember, like, you do have to have space for yourself to get creative and put out the content and be patient with yourself, because you may not feel like a super good copyright person or an author or whatever. And you don't have to be. You just need to be yourself. But you do have to kind of switch into that mode a little bit. And then you're going to have that other side where you sit down and like you're just testing links and making sure like pages go to the right places and links work correctly, and be a little bit more analytical in that way, and technical. And you have to somehow be able to kind of separate the two. And then, of course, like for me, when it came to actually launching, I wanted to get it going. And I knew I wanted to coordinate the launch with the new moon. So it was in January, right around January new moon, that my website designer and I had met up, and we still had, it was getting closer, but a lot of the work that I still had to do, I had a lot of content that I had to figure out. And there was some not like huge, not like time-wise huge pieces, but like huge figuring out pieces that we still had to do. And so I was like, okay, well then we're going to have to wait until the next month's new moon. And that is actually perfect because it gives us about 4 weeks to really figure out all these details. It seemed like good timing to her, and it seemed like good timing to me. And so I was like, oh, that's kind of cool that it'll be like right before Valentine's Day, self-love, self-care, all of that. And so I just thought that's going to be perfect. And then it wasn't until I was recording this podcast the last week of January, realizing like, oh crap, like I set this launch deadline for the middle of Mercury retrograde. And I've told you guys before, I had some serious reservations about that. Like, oh my gosh, is this a good idea or not? And then I ultimately decided like, okay, well, I'm going to either have to launch during Mercury retrograde when I planned, or I'm going to have to wait until the next new moon in March, which I didn't want to do because like we were ready, and I'm so excited to share all of this. And I wanted to just at least have that platform out there ready to go. It's like you just want to go for it. So I decided to launch anyway. And part of the reason why I wanted to launch during a new moon is because new moons are for new beginnings. And I know that might seem a little superstitious, and you absolutely, I'm not saying you should do that or should not do that. But when the moon and the sun are conjunct, when they're together, it's kind of like, the masculine and feminine coming together. The sun and moon are united. Your mind and your emotions, your body, your spirit, like there's a huge sense of being on the same page and moving forward in that way. And then of course, as the weeks come, like there's more and more light that's shed onto this, kind of building up to this culmination when the full moon happens. And I just felt like that was something that I wanted to have this energy, because I've been working so much with this cyclical, the lunar cycle, and putting a lot of intention and effort and letting the momentum grow during this time. And especially I would say like the last 7 months have been really, really connected to this cycle. And it's really affected and changed the way that, that my life has, kind of morphed a little bit. And I should probably do like a totally different episode on that. In fact, I probably will very soon. But it was important to me. And, there were definite headaches. Like I'm not going to lie. Like the worst parts of designing this website were just these technical errors. Like this one time it was all on me. Like it was 1 week before we launched. I was in there and I was like reorganizing the photos and, like I said, getting rid of a bunch of stuff that I decided not to use. And somehow I had deleted like more than half of the like main pictures. And luckily I had them all on my like desktop, but like I had to remember what went where. And it was such a frustration. I was like, this is a total Mercury in retrograde moment. And there was a couple of just like janky things like that kind of had to deal with. But I knew that going in that like I had to go slow. I had to expect certain setbacks. I had to just be patient. And like I've always said, like, I think you have to just know that, that those things are maybe for your highest good for whatever reason. Like you just got to roll with them. It's fine. And so, yeah, just leading up to the website launch, like, honestly, there's probably more that I could have done to really market it or share it. But, you know, I'm having compassion for myself. Like, we're still in the middle of this Mercury retrograde. I've got a busy season that I'm balancing, for Felicia Marty photography and video. Dave and I just made this change for him to be full time. Like there is a lot going on. So I'm just happy to have the website finally launched. I'm so excited for everyone who has been able to visit it and see it kind of come to life. And I know that it's going to continue to evolve, and grow over time. So, I'm so grateful for Monica, my website designer. Could not have done it without her. She is amazing. And I'm grateful that I got through this process. I learned so much. I feel way more equipped now as a business owner than I felt, 3 months ago. And it's not always fun to go through the rigmarole, the boring stuff, the licensures or registering with the Secretary of State, the purchasing side of things. But it is worth it. It is worth it for what it allows you to be capable of doing. So if you are thinking about starting a project or going for something, even if it looks nothing like anything I described, I hope that you feel that inspiration, that you are capable, that you can figure it out, and go for it. So, all right, you guys, let's get our cards out and get ready to close today's episode. All right, so I just reached over and pulled out the Wild Offerings deck by Tasha Silver. So that is the deck that we're going to be using today. Oh, wow. Okay. This card is Spaciousness. What do I no longer need? Help me, God, to release whatever people, places, or things drain my vital essence. Show me what will fill me with enthusiasm and joy. I love that card, and it's so interesting because we're so fresh off of a new moon, and this feels like such a full moon message, with releasing. But that's so much of what I've been thinking about lately, and maybe I'll do this new moon, full moon episode next week because I feel like the topic is strong right now. But I really try to get out of this idea that like you can only start new things on a new moon, or you can only release things on a full moon. And I love that this card came up right now because, especially for me, like after this launch, I really have just felt this need for spaciousness. I think that's why I've kind of escaped into this book that I'm reading right now, and why I needed yesterday just to be a spacious day. And I do think that we're kind of constantly in this cycle in our lives where we do have to have these moments where we ask ourselves, like, what are we carrying around that we didn't fully get to release? Or maybe a good way to think of it is like, okay, maybe a couple weeks ago, like I wasn't in the same place to need to release this. Or maybe it wasn't fully either I still needed to learn something from it, or I was still going through it, and now it's time. So that one's really, really beautiful and interesting. And if any of you out there needed that, kind of prayer in that direction towards like knowing and being shown what will fill you with enthusiasm and joy, and hopefully your enthusiasm and your joy can be your guide for this week. So yes, be patient with yourself. Be prepared to weather whatever storm might come your way. Hopefully it'll not be too impactful in a bad way. And thank you for listening to this episode and for letting me share my experience. It was really fun to reflect on that. I'm sure even looking back a year from now or so will be really interesting. So take care of yourself, and until next time.